Welcome to the Spark Companies podcast, your go-to resource for all things talent acquisition and career development. At Spark Companies, we're not just a talent acquisition agency. We're champions of potential, dedicated to connecting talented individuals with their dream careers and helping businesses thrive through exceptional talent. Join me as we explore the dynamic landscape of recruitment, uncovering insights, strategies, and success stories that empower both employers and job seekers alike. Whether you're a seasoned recruiter, passionate job seeker, or a business leader looking to elevate your team, this podcast is for you. Each episode, we'll dive into topics ranging from recruitment trends and best practices to personal and professional development tips. Our goal? To ignite sparks of inspiration, foster growth, and ultimately create opportunities that transform lives. So whether you're tuning in from the corner office or the job search trenches, get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. This is the Spark Companies podcast, where every conversation sparks opportunity.
Well, hey, everybody, welcome back. We are so excited to have you today. My name is EJ Swanson. This is Aaron Opalewski. Aaron, how are you today, man?
What's up, EJ?
How you doing? I am just fired up. I feel great today. I wish I was as fit as you, but, I wore my black T-shirt because it's slimming for filming today.
You look good, man.
I'm trying. Well,
you're good looking.
Right.
That helps. So.
You've been talking to my wife. She always tells me. Not really, but hey, we are so blessed to have you as part of the Spark Companies podcast. And today we are going to be talking about retention awareness. And, Aaron, retention is such a huge part of any business, any organization. And sure. I know that over the last 10 years or so, as you've led Spark Companies, and even beyond that, you've spent a ton of research, a ton of time in not moving from that, hey, this is just this general theory to practice. You've seen hundreds and hundreds of organizations hire, fire, and retain people throughout the years. And as you've done that, today I'm excited to hear some of your insights about that. So talk to us a little bit about retention. And as we get into it, I know today we're going to talk through just the general aspect of what pay looks like within retention, training, and a few other things. So let's dive right in. Talk to us about retention today.
Yeah, well, I think you said it well in that we get a great perspective on this, right? And it's not because we're like enlightened on the topic or anything. We get the internal side of this where we've learned over the years, things that have worked, things that haven't, and I think a lot of times we learn from our mistakes more than we learn from what's worked, or so that true. Helps us give us more perspective on like, man, that really works well. And this didn't, and we need to course correct that. So there's that side of it. And then we're in a unique position because we work with so many companies, like you said. And so over, what's been for me, almost 17 years, well, you start to see rhythms and patterns of good behaviors on this and things that kind of hold people back from having better retention and culture and, all those things. You see patterns, you see consistencies between companies, even if they're in different industries and things like that. So to me, it's interesting.
Yeah. I know so much when we talk about retention or people talk about retention, they talk about pay. Mm-hmm. And, that's kind of, I'll say what boils to the top. Yeah. It's not the only thing though, but let's dive a little bit deeper into pay and, share with us how we should be thinking about pay, what it is, around pay that really matters within the world of retention.
So hit this a couple different ways. So we recommend that people try and get above the 75th percentile of the pay for the role that they're hiring for. Okay. Whether that be right from the get-go through variable compensation. A lot of times it's a mix, but get above that 75th percentile. If you can get towards the 100th percentile or above it, and that works within your business model, well, that's amazing.
And where would you say are the best places to do research on what that 75th percentile looks like? Is that just searching other organizations in your area? Is that a national scale? What should people do within that?
You could do that. You could invest in technologies that can do that for you, or different platforms, or you could partner with Workforce Solutions, company that already has invested in those things and is doing it all the time. Hopefully in your area, and can give you both the perspective of like, here's what's going on in this market, here's what the tech and the data says. Mix those two together.
Now, when you talk through variable comp, obviously there's things like bonuses. There's things like stock or equity options. It varies.
Stuff.
Yeah, and within that, would you suggest that when people can't get to that specific dollar amount, right, over the 75th percentile, should they then increase or try to increase that variable comp in different ways?
If possible, yeah, I think that's great on show a path of how they can do that through bonus, commission, advancement in the role. It could be any of the above.
Got it. And it's funny because even as I said that out loud, I started to think, Aaron, I was thinking of non-monetary, variable comp, additional vacation, which, clearly is monetary, but there's so many different ways. Yeah. Okay.
Well, so another way to think about when I say 75th percentile, this is something that resonates with a lot of clients. So maybe it resonates with people that are listening to this too. But think about it inversely. Okay. So if I'm looking for a role, let's say I'm looking for a accountant, right? And we figure out what the 75th percentile, this is different in different parts of the company, but let's say a staff accountant, and just in general, probably around like 70 to 85,000.
Okay.
Let's just call it that.
Sure.
It is different in different markets, but I'm trying to kind of generalize, blend it together. Some of the hotter markets, like it's definitely going to be that or more. But so 3 to 5 years experience, 70 to 85,000. They probably want them to have a degree. Like, this is all the same. Well, if I'm not in that range, right? Like, let's say I want to pay 60.
Yep.
Okay. Calculate that out. Let's say that's in the 40th percentile. Okay. Well, only 4 out of 10 candidates maximum are even going to be an option for the job. So just a quick, tangible way to get people to visualize this is if I can get to 100% of the comp on this, on what's going on in the market, then 100% of the candidates that are looking will at least look at this and consider it.
Okay. I'm tracking.
If I'm at 40th percentile, I only get 4 out of 10 to look at it.
Yeah.
And it's probably not the best 4.
Yeah, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel in that scenario, certainly.
Now, but, right, not everyone is in a position, hey, we have this position, this is what's going on in our business, or we're growing, and this is a new role, and we're adding, and it's a big investment. Okay, well, that's where you got to start to be creative.
Yeah.
If you're growing, what can you do to piece them into the future growth? If it's an integral role for you, like how do you do that? But you start to think about these things that you can add on as either variable comp right out of the gate or put into a career path. And where that will fall short is, you can do that, and I can say that to a candidate up front. Maybe we get really good at that part of it, but how do we execute on that?
Right.
When do we, what's the structure on talking to them about their career path? Like, what's the timeline? How clear is that stated for them? They're going to be learning about the roles that mentioned in an interview and never talked about again, because that's what happens in most instances. This is where you need good career pathing and career mapping to match that stuff. And the more you're trying to future, set a vision, if you want people to see the vision, it's one thing to talk to them about it in the honeymoon stage when you're interviewing or up front. Well, what systems, what processes do you have in place to keep that messaging both in front of them, a cadence to talk about it, and then how are they visually, seeing it? And it's good to have all of that because different people learn in different ways.
Yeah, and that's a great point because so often we use that, I'll say, as a hook, right, to bring people in. But it's, it has to be ever in front of them. And I think being ever in front of them is also, leads us to the next part of that, which is training, continual improvement within their position and for them. What's such a big deal about training being a part of retention?
I think it starts with the onboarding, right? You want to make someone feel welcome. It's new. Anything new is got its moments where people are feeling nervous or uncomfortable, or even the most outgoing person, right? When you're stepping into something new, there's parts of that you're growing or you're changing, and we don't naturally want to do that as humans.
Right.
So when we understand that as a company that's bringing someone into the organization, well, let's be intentional about helping them with that. How do we make them feel welcome? How do we help them, get onboarded and within the role? Well, it starts with like building confidence in them, and like even if they know the job real well, they still have to learn your, we'll say culture, right? But they have to learn your language. Like that's part of your culture. They have to learn how you do things, right? And then not just how, but why you do things a certain way. And so these are a way to integrate in even someone that's like, oh, they're great in this. They got 5 years of experience, and they're, they have all these tangible examples. Like, okay, those are great scenarios if someone has
they meet
a
all
lot
the
of the
skills. Yeah.
But you still got to integrate them into, your system and your culture and your way of doing things.
Yeah, and I think that as I've seen over the years, people move through those different scenarios, the continual casting of the vision, the mission, why we're doing what we're doing. You said that, and that really stood out to me. A few minutes ago, you also talked about career paths and career maps. Oh. And that's something that I've heard you on a number of different episodes, a number of different live calls, you talk about. Yeah. I never equated retention with a career map or a career path. Yeah. And part of that was because I just always had the mindset that I was going to be, moving to the next rung or, moving up the ladder, quote unquote. Yep. But that's not everybody's mindset. So you really do need to paint it for people. Yeah. What does that look like within retention?
Is it okay if we come back to that for a minute?
Yeah.
Because I answered the onboarding part of your question.
Yeah.
But
not the training.
So
yeah,
let me answer that real quick. So that's the initial stuff on how to make someone feel welcome, yep. Teach them the basics, the fundamentals, the culture, the language, all this stuff. Okay. Well, what happens then? Like as people, right? Like this to be true. You were a minister for a long time. You still are a minister. That's right? Technically.
Yeah, minister, pastor, whatever title.
So what do you know? People need reminders on stuff.
That's right.
We all need, I need reminders.
Like
a lot of things we know to be true, it's more impactful for us when we know it, but we get a reminder and it's like, man, that's right.
Yeah.
And then you start to kind of self-evaluate. So that's what I think. So one of the things that's so important about training is like, okay, once we build a firm fundamental foundation for someone, mm-hmm. we still have to remind them and keep them on path at times.
Yeah,
and then there's training on like, okay, we'll kind of head towards the career path. Well, there's also training on like things that they should be learning to advance into other roles.
Right.
So there's both, and you might have different training set up for that.
And that's internal and external, right? That's both internal within the company and external for some people. I know a lot of teachers go back, get their master's or tenure, that type of thing.
Sure. I think like I look at that not so much as an internal or external thing. I look at that as like in all areas of life. If you're going to advance in something, like there's continual learning.
Yeah.
So in our companies, right, or our jobs, like, okay, you go through school, you go through initial training. Well, if there's not continued education in some aspect, your skills aren't going to stay as sharp, mm-hmm. and you're going to have a harder time developing or moving on to other roles, because some things, no one's ever ready for a promotion,
right?
In my opinion,
yeah,
unless you really waited too long, which can ultimately benefit some people, but you'll lose people in that too.
Got it.
So my opinion, perfect place to kind of promote someone is when they're about 70% ready.
Okay.
And they have the characteristics and skill set for that next seat to be the right seat for them. And so within that, they're very coachable. That's why them being coachable or someone that you can teach is so vital to, I believe, a winning culture, right? Because if you're trying to grow, if you're trying to promote from within, no one knows everything, but we can all learn more, right? So we find the area that someone has unique gifts in, and then if they're also coachable, okay, now we have a good recipe for future success.
Got it.
And so if I can get them about 70% there, cool. And then if we have systems in place where they're, okay, this person's going to go, I'll use our own organization, towards like a director type role.
Right.
Well, let's put them in our training classes that are tied to like the leadership of people, communication with people, performance management, things that maybe they're not doing in their like recruiting or account management role as much right now. Now, if they get little, like they don't have to have the title to look at someone else on the team, higher or lower, to be able to lead them, to be able to lead them, or set a good example, or do some of that, right? And that's one of the things we look for in that interview process. Like, what have you done so far? And if they haven't, it's usually something we give feedback on. Like, hey, here's an area to focus on improving. You're doing a great job, but in this next role, these things are going to be important. And it's a very flat organization, within comp. Like, it doesn't matter what role. If you're in the right role, you make the most comp.
Yeah.
And then, hey, I'll give you I heard that someone spilled a coffee this morning.
Okay.
And a call got back to Anna on it that we needed to call the cleaning company. And oh man, I need to practice my patience.
Yeah.
Calm down after a minute, but it's like, man, like I got some work to do, because we know if we see something that's wrong, we fix it. We want to leave an area left better than it was before we got there. If we see a problem, we go fix it. So in this instance, I don't feel like we were applying that. And then not only that, but someone called Anna. I was like, man, I'm frustrated. I wish they would just, it's like, well, let's pull that person aside and not embarrass them, but like, hey, this is how we do things here.
Right.
So,
and just walk them through it.
Yeah. So we got some work to do on stuff like that, or it's not perfect, or that's an evolving thing, right? Because maybe someone else handles that situation a different way, but this is in all areas. Like, it's like, man, like, how do we coach people through stuff? And those two people are in two completely different areas, but there was a chance to lead there. And I don't know the end result of that yet.
Right.
But I'm hopeful that we pulled that person aside and we did what we could. And look, if we can't get the coffee stain out, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But we should try.
Right. Yeah. Do everything you can in your power to.
And that, like, let's say I spilled that coffee, right?
Right.
Well, I hope I would work to clean it up.
Yeah.
But let's say I didn't, or I had a meeting to go to or something like that. Like, well, if someone kind of pulled me to the side and like, hey, like, you preached this stuff, I think you should have done that. That's, I'd say, you're probably right. I got a lot going on, but I could pause for a minute and say, hey, I'm going to be another 90 seconds and go grab a couple rags and, do what I can.
Yeah.
So just an example, right?
There's
so many ways.
There's so many facets within that.
Like outside of that promotion.
Yeah.
And we're looking for people when they're interviewing for those things to have examples of how they've done that so far. Because in that type of role where you're going to lead people, you're going to have conversations like that daily.
Yeah.
Like good and bad.
Yeah. And sorry, I skipped ahead earlier. I'm so glad that you went back to training, because there's some just golden nuggets within that. And I think the key to 70% within that is huge. That, that's when you start looking and you start giving them, more responsibility in different things. Obviously, some people, as they're going through, and I know at Spark Companies, we do a great job of this, is, really painting that map for people. So describe that a little bit in the keys to retention within a career map or a career path.
Well, there's things about every job that are tough, and there's things about every day that are probably less than optimal.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that stuff comes at people in waves. And, that's why another thing, like, okay, someone that has a high level of effort, someone that is hungry, to advance and grow, like, these are things that are important to us.
Yeah.
And part of that is because, like, look, things are not going to be easy. And I say that to everyone in every interview that I do before we hire them. Like, hey, nothing about this is going to be easy. It's actually going to be really, really hard.
Yeah.
Probably harder than you think or what. Like, I'm saying this to you, and it's still in some ways probably going to be harder than it is. And I wait for the day when someone comes up to me. It's like, man, you way overstated that. But that doesn't generally happen, because as you get into it, even if like someone has quick success, there's a lot that comes at you, you know, day to day.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of that is an advantage you get as your company grows and you promote organically and you do well with this stuff organically. If you message this well, or you just have good examples, if you do both, it's even better. But like, if someone can see that other people have been in the same scenario and then been able to work through that and get better, that's getting them focused on like kind of like future state on like, hey, like,
yeah, this is possible. This is obtainable. This is doable.
Then when you're guiding someone along the way with good communications or trainings or reinforcement from their leader that like, hey, like, yeah, we're working on X, Y, and Z, but you're doing great on A, B, C, and you're actually ahead of pace, you know, over this X timeline. Like, you're doing a lot of good things. Like, this is just part of it. That's all good stuff. Well, when I can put this on the map and say, look, like, here's the variables that you're going to deal with every day or within this role, or here's some loops that we see on success within this role. Well, here's what's on the other side of those down loops, you know, in this career path. Or here's it in this one. You start to show people that visually.
Is it always competency based? Meaning like, hey, if you hit this, you know, in our language, this igniter, it equals a new position? Or is it, hey, when you're able to solidify this skill set, you move? Where do you suggest people set those up as?
Okay. There's complexities to this question and answer, right? So, and this is where, you know, people get themselves in trouble on watching a quick 90-second clip or 30-second clip and not understand that there's context to it.
Got it.
So a career path within the same role, as much as you can, like a lot of times this is easy to do in not easy, but it's very doable in production roles, you know, and you should do this as much as you can. Do X and then you get to Y. You know,
okay.
You're in Y and here's how you get to Z. And you just map it out like a clear, straightforward, like, here's your number here, and when you cross this number, you go to this level.
Got it.
I love that in those scenarios where it's kind of like an advancement within the same role.
Yep.
What I don't like that for is, okay, like, and this is more like sales-driven, production-driven, like where there's clear numbers.
Yeah, metrics-based.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's say someone's advancing on that path. Well, just because they're advancing on that path doesn't mean that they're the right person for that leadership or, you know, management or, you know, director level role where they start to have other people reporting to them.
Yep.
In fact, now that can work well, because if they can get on the side of all the stuff that becomes important with that, and we mentioned some of them earlier, but it's more of like the EQ side of things, like how do you
treat other people,
other people, lead. Hope everyone treats people well or has good intentions on that. But like, can you lead them? Like, how do you do a conflict? Like I'm not going to repeat everything.
Right.
A lot of the things we talked about earlier. Well, if they're strong on that and they perform well, that's a slam dunk because they are able to lead by example. You know, one of the things as a leader, you can be really good at some of this EQ stuff, but can you actually teach that person that you're working with how to be better at their job?
Mm-hmm.
That's why the leadership roles are a little more complex, because it's not always the best. You know, you got to be careful. Just because they cross X number doesn't mean they're the best director or manager.
Yep.
So you don't.
And we've seen that over and over. I'm sure everybody on here has.
A lot of times top performers aren't, you know, because they blur some of the lines, or they're focused on some of their own stuff, or they they play in the gray, and you have to kind of pull that back a little bit. Well, they're not necessarily the best person to teach processes, or things. Like, you need that person's kind of like a wild stallion that you got reins on them, and you got to keep that going. Like, if they can get that under control, they can be a great leader. But a lot of times, like, they might not be, or they might not be ready for that yet. So that could be the worst person to put in that role. Inversely, if I got someone really good on that, but they don't know how to do an effective job of the fundamentals of the role that will lead someone to success, if they can't do that, well, then they're going to struggle, because they can sit there and say a bunch of good stuff that they heard in a book or that we show them in a training, but they do have to be able to perform that role at a base level where they can help that person improve. A sweet spot of that is someone that can teach the fundamentals and processes really well. They're great on all this EQ stuff. If their performance is top notch, it's better. But if they're a above average performer and they're really good with the fundamental stuff, and then they're a good communicator, have good EQ, all this kind of stuff, that could be a great person, especially if they don't have an ego issue.
Yep.
It's not everything about ego is bad, but there's a lot of things that can tip to bad. Well, the person that is an above average performer, but is very self-confident, at the same, they may not be the best performer, but they're able to perform. They function well in the job.
I'm tracking.
They're fundamental, and then they're not intimidated by other success. Man, that's a recipe for a potential great leader, because the role of the leader isn't to create a bunch of people that can do base level. You want them to become better than you.
Right.
Well, that requires you to be confident in your own skin. That's actually the best leader. Go out and create me 10 other, top performers.
Yeah.
Or, and
duplicate yourself.
If you can help someone, if you can help other people excel to a level past you, that's never going to dim your light.
That's right.
In fact, you're probably on a fast track, at least here, and in the companies that we consult for, or we're building out like talent consulting for, like how to structure their teams or how to grow their teams, or, how do we create a better culture? Mm-hmm. Well, it's stuff like this. This isn't the only thing, but like, that's the type of person to me that's on a fast track towards an executive role.
Got it.
Because they can lead people and get the best out of people.
Yeah, that's good. Wow.
It's the number one skill that I would take. I would take skilled people in every area.
Right.
But if you ask me, what do I want more of, or we can never get enough of, it's that. Because if we have that, we can continue to bring people in, cultivate good performance, and continue to grow faster and be on purpose and go after our mission faster. Wow. And I know that's not just our organization. That's every organization that wants to grow and has a big vision.
Yeah.
They're starving for people like that.
Yeah. Wow. What else, just as we wrap up today, we want this episode just a little bit shorter. It's been a wild and crazy week here, but consistency is key for us as we're going through stuff. What else would you wrap up with as we talk through retention?
Always be looking to tweak it.
Yeah.
Or maybe not tweak it, but don't think you got it all figured out. And understand that even if you get a good rhythm, it's an evolving thing, right? So like you could have all this stuff, right? And you could do a good job for 6 months and you can kind of get off track. And a lot of times that can come through growth, right? For us, where we get off track on some of this stuff is when we have certain people doing parts of this, right? Mm-hmm. And then we grow, or we create a new role, or, a lot of times it's through promotion that we lose some of our cadence and infrastructure in an area, and things move fast, and we don't always recalibrate on that perfectly.
That's a great perspective.
But we will get it figured out.
Backfill it and be watching for it.
You got to watch it. And so, like, I personally feel like right now, because we've had some promotions, and we created a new business unit this year, and we're sitting here recording this in February. I don't know when it's going to drop.
Yeah.
But we're in a season right now in Q1 of 2024. We're through some promotions and some growth within the company. We're recalibrating how we do some of our training, how we set some of the career map conversations. And like, we're still doing it, but I don't feel like we're like on the nose with it right now.
Got it.
But we'll get there because we're aware of it, right? And so that's how I'd end it.
Yeah. And I think, just even the title of this episode, retention awareness is just so key. You've got to be aware within your org where people are at, where you're taking them, and how you can help them get there. And as concise as you gave us points today, Aaron, I hope that as people are listening and as they hear this, they almost get into a healthy frenzy, right? Where they go, oh man, I got to be thinking about my people. How am I onboarding them? How am I retaining them? What am I doing to train them? Do they have the career maps? Do their comps, match up? And what else can I do in order to do that? I know the statistics are out there that, talk about the cost of recruiting a new person versus retaining a person within there, within your org, and especially if you have a good one. So thanks for the tips today. That's super, super healthy for each of us to be thinking about. And maybe today, as you're, tuning in, as you're listening, as you're watching this episode, that's something that you are challenged by. Go ahead, drop a comment down below, give us a like, and share this with somebody within your organization or your influence. And as you do, take the opportunity to continue to communicate with us. We want to grow right alongside of you. We're thankful that you tuned in today on the Spark Companies podcast. And as we do this more and more, know that we have an amazing plan and a path or a map, just to be kind of coy, within it where we're going. So Aaron, thanks again for the knowledge today. I hope all you guys have a great day.
Thanks, EJ.